This is Ken Klippenstein with TYT Investigates. I'm here to talk to you about a leaked email I got from the emails from the CEO of the biggest private prison contractor in the country. Of course, private prisons are big business in the U.S. So for that company to be the largest one in the country, that says quite a lot. And I'm going to get into their lobbying and political contributions in just a minute here. So what the email showed essentially was the CEO of this private prison firm. It's called Geo Group, lashing out at a range of different subjects. And just looking at my notes here, those subjects include Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, the Jewish activist group Never Again Action. They protest against ICE facilities. And then this is my favorite one, quote, misguided individuals who, quote, defame the American flag. I don't quite know how you defame an inanimate object, but I'll explain that to you in a minute here. And so this was all an internal Geo Group email provided to me by an employee that just thought the public ought to know what's going on in this company. Just to remind you, this is the biggest private prison firm in the United States. So the CEO's name is George Zoli. I'm going to read from the email for you guys. I link to the article, and within the article is a link to the email, so you can see the leaked email yourselves. But just some of the highlights of it. In the email, Zoli, this was a company-wide email. The CEO tells his employees, organizations that have, or I'm sorry, the CEO tells his employees, many of you are hungry for information to help set the record straight, not only for you, but in some circumstances for your family and friends. And he means set the record straight against what protesters and political activists are accusing these private prisons, of mistreatment of migrant detainees. I find that interesting because, according to the CEO, at least, that means that people within his own company who actually work in this private prison firm would appear to have concerns about the optics of this and how it's coming off. And then he said family and friends. That suggests that their own families, are expressing at least some sort of discomfort or dissatisfaction with what's going on. And that seems to me to be an indication, or at least a suggestion that maybe these protests are working. So when I asked the company, about this email, they said, oh, we communicate with our 23,000 employees. Just to remind you, biggest private prison firm. That's a lot of people. And they said that, we try to give them updates and quote steps being taken to address recent events that have occurred at our facilities. They're kind of referring to the protests, and they also make reference to a shooting that happened. Unfortunately, no one was, I don't believe anyone was injured. Um, but it goes beyond just informing their employees, even though that's what their spokesperson would have you think. If you read the email, it says that, it specifically mentions the protests and incidents in Boulder, Aurora, Tacoma, Boca Raton, San Antonio. It's kind of like this running list of all of the targets of the protests. And it kind of reminds you that, it's not just Trump out there. There are people pushing back, questioning, and, really putting their lives on the line to go and protest these locations. Um, it, One of the groups is called Never Again Action. It's a group of Jewish organizers that try. The idea is never again are we going to have concentration camps. Hopefully that's their goal, and it's very interesting that they invoke the Holocaust and concentration camps in which Jews suffer, because that's a pretty potent historical reminder of what can happen if the public doesn't get involved and stop a drift towards authoritarian practices. And in one of the emails, the CEO specifically mentions this group and says, quote, this new organization sprang up after Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez referred to ICE processing center as, quote, concentration camps. And then he actually goes on to say that the Holocaust Museum rejected the comparison between the Holocaust and current events, which obviously the situations are different. Nobody's saying that ICE is the Holocaust. They're just saying that if we're going to draw any sort of lessons from the Holocaust, we're going to take seriously when people's rights begin being eroded. But that's of course not what the CEO of this private prison firm wants his employees to think, and seems to be trying to insinuate that never get action and these protesters are ridiculous to try to learn some lessons or draw comparisons between the two. Um, but it's interesting that he mentions Ocasio Cortez because that's invoking explicitly politics. And this is an email that went out to all sorts of employees at the firm. Um, And of course, he's going to talk about Ocasio Cortez because just a few days prior to the email, she had visited a bunch of Customs and Border Protection rather, detention facilities. She described the conditions as horrifying, posted videos that went viral, and got a lot of people concerned about it. So can't say I'm shocked that he would talk about her, but it's interesting that he would bring politics up in the workplace like that. And he kind of tries to hedge against accusations that this is sort of telling employees like, oh, these are the bad guys, you better agree with me. If you read the email, it says the intent of my message is not to cause you to be fearful, but rather ensure you know fact from fiction, which is interesting because a lot of the insinuations, in the email and attachment in it, which again you can find in the article, are pretty dubious. I think he goes on to say false narratives and deliberate mischaracterizations were the basis for these recent events. He means the protests. And then almost sounds like something you would hear Trump say, fake news. He goes on to say misguided individuals intimidated our employees and defamed the American flag at a time when we recently commemorated the birth of our nation and the 75th anniversary of our landing at Normandy. Yes, I'm sure that's why the protesters chose the date that they did, was to spit in the face of the people that fought at Normandy. I really doubt that there's any connection between those two. I have to say, it sounds sort of hysterical to draw that connection. But again, that's just hilarious to me. Defame the American flag. What does that even mean? You know? And so I asked the spokesperson for Geo Group, what is he referring to when he says defame the American flag? She referred me to a news article of protesters that took down an American flag in front of some ICE facility and put up a Mexican flag. And so I guess according to them, that's defaming the American flag. So make of that what you will. Um, and then it's got an attachment, the email saying, setting the record straight on Geo's role. Remember a couple minutes ago I said that employees were asking that, for corrections, not just for themselves, but for their friends and family, which suggests that they're being asked about it, and maybe people have some cognitive dissonance about it, which good, they should, I think. um, but if you look at the attachment, it's got a lot of. It's supposed to be a sort of like facts list to answer questions people may have about critical questions people may have about these private prisons. Called Geo Group, I think, is the leading contractor of private facilities for ICE. And just at a glance, some of them, are not untrue, but a lot of them, seem sort of dubious. I'll give you an example. One of the bullet points in the list says, we proudly comply with the Obama Biden administration's performance based national detention standards. But the Department of Homeland Security, which runs these, which ICE is under, their inspector general released a report that found, quote, significant health and safety risks, including nooses in detainee cells, improper and overly restrictive segregation, and inadequate detainee medical care. That doesn't sound to me like proudly complying with the Obama administration's performing-based national detention standards. And that's actually what they found, that they weren't in compliance with it. So that bullet point that they sent to their employees seems completely untrue to me. And then another one is they say, let's see here. They said, quote, we don't play a role in passing criminal justice or immigration laws. We have never advocated for or against criminal justice or immigration enforcement policies. One section states, but Geo Group is a huge contributor in lobbying money and campaign contributions to all sorts of politicians, mostly Republicans, and specifically, giving money to lobbyists specifically for Homeland Security appropriations stuff. Um, and also stuff that would seem like immigration. So that on its face seems untrue. Can't say I'm shocked that the CEO would lie to his employees or at least mislead them. I don't know if he knows that it's untrue, but yeah, I think it's something folks should know. So I'm going to switch to